I'm Connor Ruebusch, and if you are interested in the finer points of face punching, you've come to the right place. This is Heavy Hands. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Heavy Hands podcast episode. I am your host, Connor Ruebusch, joined once again by Patrick Wyman. Dr. Patrick Wyman, please forgive me for that horrible social misstep.
Get it right, dude.
I'm so sorry. Right. I'm so sorry. Pat, do you walk around in your daily life wearing like the octagonal cap of a history professor? Of a history
I did not
doctor?
buy one. We were given the option to buy one, and I did not buy one, to my everlasting shame.
I thought that was a requirement.
There was like a 5-month lead time to buy the fucking hat, and I forgot about it until like 2 months beforehand, and now they're like, well, it's too late to get the hat.
So you're not going to... Do you have a ceremony upcoming?
No, I had the ceremony a few weeks ago.
And you didn't wear a hat?
No, I wore like a mortarboard.
Okay, but there is a fancy one for history doctorates, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, there absolutely is a fancy hat, but that's what I'm saying is like you have to order it months beforehand. And I was really concerned about things like, finishing my fucking dissertation. So I missed out on the hat situation.
I think they could step the whole thing up and make the hats more popular if they just made them like wizard hats with stars and crescent moons all over them.
Yeah, I mean, well, dude, there's some weird-ass academic regalia out there. Like, you should see some of the stuff they've come up with. They got chevrons and, like, all sorts of weird patches and stuff. It's, like, if there's a reason to go through the hell of a PhD, the regalia is the biggest attraction, I think.
Well, welcome to Heavy Hands, a show all about graduate regalia. We will be talking about all the latest fashions in the world of academia today. But before that, let's have a brief discussion about some UFC fights. We have quite an interesting fight night card coming up. This is UFC Fight Night Ottawa, with the main event, of course, being between Rory MacDonald and Stephen Thompson, one of the most interesting number one contenders fights I can think of in recent memories. Is one of those fights that just gets you all giddy. It's like Nurmagomedov versus who was Nurmagomedov supposed to just fight?
Tony Ferguson?
Tony Ferguson. I almost forgot the Ferg. It's like Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson all over again, except it appears to actually be happening, which is fantastic. We're going to be talking about that in depth for our first segment. After that, later in the show, we're going to get to Donald Cerrone versus Patrick Cote, a welterweight matchup between those two men, one a former lightweight, one a former middleweight, even a former light heavyweight at one point, I think.
Yeah, he fought Tito at 205 way back in the day.
So, and then we've got women's flyweight, the inaugural flyweight bout for the women's divisions between Valerie Letourneau and Joanne Calderwood. Later in the show, we're going to do a big old fight smorgasbord because there's a lot of little fights here that are interesting but probably don't deserve a full episode of their own. Those are Tandon McCrory versus Krzysztof Jotko, Chris Beal versus Joe Soto, Elias Theodoro versus Sam Alvey, Ronda Marcos versus Jocelyn Jones, Liebarger and Ali Bagatinov versus John Herrera. So we have a lot of interesting fights to talk about. First of all, as promised, let's get into the welterweight number one contenders fight. Rory Mac versus Stephen Thompson, Wonderboy. A really, really intriguing fight that, personally, I'm not afraid to admit, I have waffled on many, many times so far. Pat, I think you are probably a little more confident in this one, so why don't you go ahead and talk first?
I don't know that I would say that I'm more confident in it, but I am and remain a believer in Rory MacDonald as a fighter. And that's not to say that I'm not a believer in Stephen Thompson. I think this is a really intriguing matchup with a lot of layers to it. There's a lot going on in this fight. There's a lot to unpack, a lot to break down. But I think that Rory MacDonald is legitimately one of the very best and best put together and best trained fighters on the planet. And sure. I think that if there is a fighter in this division who has the various tool sets necessary to beat Stephen Thompson, and I don't think that there are very many, I think that it's Rory Mac.
It's hard to think of a more technically complete fighter than Rory MacDonald, and a more strategically complete fighter. It's hard to think of a more adaptable fighter, I guess is what I'm saying. Rory MacDonald, he basically has all the tools, you need. Of course, he has his preferences, but he can pretty much do everything you need to do to be a well-rounded mixed martial artist, and he can fight in almost every way you need to. He can throw submissions up off of his back. He can wrestle. He can control or attack from top position with ground and pound. He can throw punches at range. He can fight in the clinch and in the inside, and he can kick. He can pressure. He can outfight. He can counter. He's a very, very well-developed fighter. I think a lot of credit for that has to go to Firas Zahabi, and some of it probably, too, to the mentorship of Georges St. Pierre. I think Rory's been training alongside GSP since he was 16, something like that.
So MacDonald has been with Zahabi for the last 5 or 6 years. I think he first went there after he lost to Carlos Condit. So he's been there since like 2010. That's a long time in MMA to be training under a single coach.
Yeah, it is, and Zahabi is one of those guys. He's the Jackson of this generation, really, like the top name in terms of smart training, and so that's really that. Rory MacDonald, I think, represents that very, very well. Since we're already talking about him, I figure we may as well get into a little more why Rory represents an interesting matchup for Thompson in this bout. Personally, I think, to me, Rory MacDonald, because Pat, you've already hinted at the fact that you're going to pick Rory. I'm going to pick Rory as well, so I don't want to spoil the discussion, but I think the interesting part about this discussion is why it's so hard for me to make that pick. So we can kind of frame our whole conversation with that. Rory, to me, is the fighter who can, like Johnny Hendricks, can threaten, like I thought Johnny Hendricks would, can threaten the wrestling game and the top game. He's probably a little more effective as a controlling grappler than Johnny Hendricks, who's more of a rinse and repeat kind of wrestler, without being so flummoxed at range. Of course, before that fight with Johnny Hendricks, I thought that Stephen Thompson would struggle to deal with Johnny Hendricks' improved kickboxing, especially his leg kicks and things like that, and he didn't, not even a little bit. So, fortunately for Rory MacDonald, I think he is a better developed outfighter than Johnny Hendricks ever was. He's been doing it a lot longer. We've seen in his fights with guys like Robbie Lawler and Tarek Safadine that he is comfortable at range. Most importantly, I think, is he's a more comfortable kicker. Not just setting up low kicks with punches in the Dutch kickboxing tradition, but actually leading with front kicks and side kicks of his own, and throwing low kicks as well, which would be nice to punish those legs of Stephen Thompson when he adopts that side stance.
Yeah, so this fight to me is all about range and who can hurt the other guy where.
Sure.
That's what makes this so intriguing. Is Thompson is an exceptional outfighter. I think Thompson might be the best outfighter in all of MMA if we're going to be honest about it.
Yeah, that feels right on the surface. That feels right.
Yeah, because really outfighting consists of two things. It consists of setting a range that you like and then doing something with it. Like that sounds basic, but there are a lot of guys who are really good at one or the other. That when you give them long range, they have a lot of things that they can do there, or they can establish long range, but then they're not necessarily very good at exploiting the distance that they've created. Mm-hmm. Thompson is a master at that because he has really two things that he's very, very good at doing. Right, once he's established that range, so he uses these long kicks, these front kicks, round kicks. Hook kicks, side kicks, this wide variety of kicks in conjunction with his footwork, his understanding of the space of the cage, to keep you outside. And once you're outside, then he can do one of two things. Either he can come in on you with blitzing punching combinations and finish with those really sneaky kicks that he likes to sneak up over your shoulder, or he can let you come to him and then use his just gorgeous counterpunching game. And Thompson, unlike most karate-based fighters, works at a really quick pace. So this means that he can set that long distance, but he's not going to do what Machida does, where he just waits on you and he gets into these kind of staring matches. When Thompson creates that distance, he's going to go out there and he's going to win rounds if he can't finish you.
Yeah,
that makes his game really dangerous.
You have to assume some of that has to do with his different sporting backgrounds. He bears some resemblance to a lot of the Shotokan guys we've seen in MMA, most notably Lyoto Machida, with his stance and things like that, though there are definite differences. But from a sort of a, I'm not sure what you'd call it,
process perspective?
No, his background is like point kickboxing. There's a term for it that I can't quite recall.
Yeah, he fought in the world in the World Combat League, same league that guys like Uriah Hall fought in.
Yeah, and he's done long pants kickboxing quite extensively, and so he does have melded into his karate, his kempo. He has a round-winning mentality, not just a sit-back-and-wait-for-the-perfect shot mentality, which you might get from Shotokan competition. So he has been groomed to win rounds the way you still need to in MMA, a sport where you need to land more and better shots than the other guy to take the frame. And so that predilection towards volume, I think, is what makes him really, really special as an outfighter. Because even a lot of very good outfighters struggle to put together volume the way that Thompson does. Even guys like... especially long and tall fighters. We talked about this with Sean Strickland, for example. Vladimir Klitschko always had this issue where he would just happily wade away rounds. The other guy didn't know how to cover the distance, and he was okay. But like you said, he sometimes struggled, and he's a long-time heavyweight champion in boxing, and even he sometimes struggled with not only setting his range, but then doing something with it. And Stephen Thompson's very, very good at manipulating the distance and managing it, and then constantly finding ways to hurt you while you're struggling to cross it. And he does that with angles, as well as just by framing and keeping a space with his arms and his legs. He's rarely standing in front of you when you rush after him, and that's what makes him such a dangerous counterpuncher, but it's also what makes it so difficult to close the distance. Because with a guy like Stephen Thompson, you're not just thinking, okay, I'm going to eat a punch coming in, but I'm going to close the distance. You are eating a punch coming in, and then you look up after catching one on the chin, and he's not in front of you anymore. And so that process repeats itself until you're really badly hurt and staggering around the canvas. That happened with Johnny Hendricks pretty suddenly, but it's happened more attritively in the past with guys like Robert Whittaker. And I think that win stands up really, really well, considering how far Robert Whittaker has gone since moving up to middleweight.
That was the one where I was like, holy shit, this Stephen Thompson cat is for real. Because I was very high on Robert Whittaker then. I'm still high on Robert Whittaker now. But like I legit thought that Robert Whittaker was like a potential top 5 type of welterweight. And so for Thompson to take him apart the way that he did, in the pocket too, that was the part that was really surprising, was the way that he just dismantled Whittaker with counterpunches. Yeah, and a variety of them too. Like, it's not just that Thompson is like a one-note counterpuncher where he has one or maybe two things that he's really good about doing. He has a whole arsenal of things. So he can hit pull counters, he can hit backstepping counters where he's going straight back. He can step off the angles as he's pulling back while throwing. Like, it's a really diverse and really dangerous array of things that he can do, and it makes him really hard to prep for.
So do you think, because that fight's kind of the one that really worries me for Rory MacDonald, is that Robert Whittaker fight. I think Rory's boxing has a lot in common with Robert's, especially the way Robert boxed at that time. He managed to touch Stephen Thompson quite a bit, but he had a lot of trouble catching him clean with any of his shots. And even throwing these good, straight, technical punches, leading with his jab inside, he was still eating counters. And Stephen Thompson has such a good notion of the distance that he's always got about 3 or 4 inches of extension left to put through your head when you're just barely touching him with your knuckles. I do wonder, Pat, do you think that the frames of the two fighters will play a role in this fight? Because Johnny Hendricks was 3 inches at least shorter than Stephen Thompson, significantly shorter of limb. Rory MacDonald is basically the same size with a little bit wider shoulders and longer arms.
Yeah, it's a major factor to me in this fight. It's a big part of the reason why I'm picking MacDonald, is just because Thompson is not going to have the height and reach advantage that he's so used to having. Yeah. And it's not just that, it's the way that MacDonald fights. Like, so I mentioned earlier that I thought that this fight came down to range and who can hurt the other guy where. Yeah. And like Thompson makes his hay at long range. We talked about this, that he is an outside fighter, and that is not a range that Rory MacDonald is just going to give to him in this fight. Thompson can do what he wants to do in terms of playing on the outside, but he's not going to be able to throw those hook and side and round kicks with impunity the way that he was against a guy like Johnny Hendricks, who was so much shorter. And not just shorter, but like Hendricks is a pocket fighter at heart. That's really where he wants to be. He doesn't have a lot of tools for fighting you from way, way, way outside.
Yeah.
And Hendricks too doesn't have awesome pressure footwork, and he never has. That's just not really his game.
Yeah.
You know? So in hindsight, that was a much more difficult matchup for Hendricks than I think you or I or anybody else anticipated. So I'm watching. So I've got Thompson, Whitaker playing in the background right now, and I'm watching this. And Whitaker, as good a jabbing fighter as he is, was still a pocket specialist. And even though he had tools from the outside, that was not really his game then. And so I think he was really, really focused on getting into the pocket at all costs. Because he thought, like, okay, I want to trade punches with Stephen Thompson. That's where I have the biggest advantage. And so he wasn't patient about working his way inside. And I think what we've seen from Rory MacDonald is when you give him 5 rounds to work, he's going to be patient. He's not going to take stupid risks as he pressures.
Yeah, absolutely. I recall the Tarek Saffiedine fight in particular as a very patient, calculated fight where Rory very slowly, while still winning rounds, discovered his openings and figured out the right way to attack Saffiedine without putting himself at risk. And that's sometimes that kind of clinical attitude can, I don't know, Tarek Saffiedine is not the guy you necessarily need to worry about knocking you out as you come in, but it will definitely help him against a guy like Stephen Thompson, who has enough power and enough judgment of distance and enough aggression in him to make the most of that.
Yeah, and I think that MacDonald's jab is going to play a huge role in doing that. Mm-hmm. That at these ranges where Thompson thinks that he's safe, I see a lot of Thompson testing the range with a kick and then eating a jab or eating a 1-2 in response for that. Yeah. MacDonald's height and his reach give him a lot of margin for error here in terms of countering Thompson's angles, because he doesn't have to step as far in as other guys have to try and counter those shots. Mm-hmm. Like he's got a lot more margin for error. I think the other thing we saw from the Saffiedine fight that makes me think that MacDonald has a good shot here is how good he was at catching those kicks, and if not turning them into takedowns, though he did turn one or two into takedowns, at using them to off-balance Thompson and open up his counters, especially his low kick counters. So MacDonald had never been a low kicker before that Saffiedine fight, but he knew that Saffiedine was going to try and low kick with him. And you can't just concede a whole tool to one guy in a fight. I think MacDonald understands that better than just about anybody else. So suddenly, out of nowhere, Rory MacDonald is landing 3, 4, 5, 6 good low kicks against a guy who thought that he was going to own that particular distance and that particular range. And I think, a lot of those came off of caught kicks or deflected kicks or blocked kicks. And I think that if he can do, it's going to be a lot harder to do that against Stephen Thompson than it was against Saffiedine. But I think that MacDonald is better now than he was then at doing that.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. A lot, you can easily fall into the trap of fighting another guy's game if you try to do that. But I'm a big believer in the notion that you need to be able to compete, especially in an area where a guy feels like it's his specialty. If a guy comes at you and he's like, all right, kicking range is my thing, I'm going to throw the kicks, you have got to counter some of those kicks with kicks of your own. Or you've even got to lead with some kicks. You've got to show him that you can swim in the same waters as him. Even if you're not going to beat him, you have to make him think about the fact that he can't just own that one range or that one tool set. And if it's a guy like Saffiedine who specializes in low kicks, so I wonder where the line lies for a guy like Rory MacDonald to come into a fight with Stephen Thompson and think, all right, he wants to have this super long range, I can't let him own that. Then does it become a problem for Rory if he ends up, as he has shown a tendency to in the past, against guys who aren't as good as Stephen Thompson, just fighting an outsider's game? Does he necessarily want to be just jabbing and throwing side kicks to the thigh and things like that and front kicks to the body against Stephen Thompson, while Stephen Thompson is then possibly comfortable enough at that distance to pick him apart? I mean, granted, he doesn't want to rush in and give Stephen Thompson the counterpunch opportunities either. And having a jab is, as you said, a big asset for him, because there's not really anybody that Thompson has fought who can just maintain balance and touch him from the same range that he prefers. But I do wonder if Stephen Thompson is possibly even more adaptable in that range than we have had a chance to see, because nobody has actually agreed to let him fight it.
See, I think that if he falls into it, if McDonald falls into that kind of fight, Thompson is absolutely going to pick him apart. There's no question about that. But the point isn't that you consent to that kind of fight. It's that you try and keep it as close to even as possible in that space while working towards the ranges where you do have the advantage.
Right.
And for MacDonald, that's the pocket. Like, MacDonald is a much craftier pocket fighter than I ever gave him credit for beforehand. Especially, I think we saw a lot of that in the Lawler fight. And Zahabi was telling him, you got to stop exchanging with this guy. You can't, that's not what's going to win this fight for you. But MacDonald kept it pretty even in the pocket from a technical perspective with Lawler, who is one of the craftiest pocket fighters that we've ever seen in MMA.
Yeah.
And he had good success there, and that's how he hurt Lawler when he hurt him in that fight, was exchanging with him. Now, in the long run, that was probably not the right play given the power differential, but the fact that he was able to do it with so much success, and the elbow counters that he was throwing, his right elbow was fantastic. His ability to sit down and throw combinations in that space, I think that that's going to be where he wins this fight against Thompson if he does. Not just in the pocket, but also slowly but surely backing Thompson up to the fence, not rushing to cover the distance, not getting frustrated when Thompson inevitably manages to get off the fence, but picking and choosing his spots to find the flurries. Yeah. Right? So you keep it as even as possible at range, but then when you get your chances to throw 3, 4, 5, 6 punches in a row, when Thompson backs up to the fence, then you unload those head body combinations, elbows, dive into the clinch, work your takedowns. I don't think there's anybody in MMA who is better equipped to do that, to put together that kind of patient, really competent, well-designed game plan and enact it in a fight than MacDonald.
Yeah, and that's really been the phase where we've seen MacDonald take over fights that he has otherwise controlled from range. So I definitely see what you're saying there. I mean, he did that against Safadine with the pocket combinations and the counter punches. He did it to Tyron Woodley. After pressuring him and controlling the distance, he became comfortable to close it and throw those combos. He did it against BJ Penn. I do think that basically holding up there is going to give him a much better chance of actually working a wrestling game of some kind against Stephen Thompson than anybody else has been able to. And I think he can actually compete in a lot of the phases. And then there's a thing that we can't necessarily analyze. We can't necessarily look at this and talk about how it will affect the fight, but we do have to take into account the fact that Wonderboy has trained pretty extensively at TriStar. He's worked with Rory in the past. You have to imagine that gives both of them something of an advantage, but probably more so for Rory, having Faraz with his analytical eye, having worked with Stephen Thompson, knowing what he's good at, and then bringing in a lot of training partners like Raymond Daniels to emulate what Stephen Thompson does. I think that has to give an edge to the strategic thinking of the TriStar team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to harp on this too much, but that is they just know what they're doing there. They do things really, really, really intelligently. And I guarantee you that MacDonald has spent every sparring session for this camp working on slowly but surely pressuring guys with Thompson's skill sets. That's how he's fought every sparring session here, is against switch stance fighters who are going to try and move through the space of the cage, who are going to try and stay away, who are going to try and keep their backs off of it, but who can hurt him if he tries to come in recklessly. So I don't know. I mean, for Zahabi, the first time I interviewed him, he mentioned very proudly having worked with Stephen Thompson, that he thought that Thompson had a lot to teach him. And that he had learned a lot from, and that he had learned a lot from having worked with him in the past. And I think if Zahabi is learning from you, then Zahabi is also learning what it takes what the weaknesses of that style are. He's always thinking in those terms. And so, I don't know. I hope that we're not engaging in some motivated thinking here. Though that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, that's my fear. When I watch a fight like this, when I watch footage and studying for a fight like this, I always have this fear that I'm like, am I looking for things that back up what I want to pick? Mm-hmm. Because I as we've already both said, we're both picking Rory MacDonald here. I can absolutely see Stephen Thompson strafing Rory MacDonald from range and hurting him. We mentioned this before the show began, but Rory is not the most durable guy in the world. He's certainly tough. He's very mentally tough, and we've seen that in several of his fights, but he's not incredibly durable. He tends to get injured, and he has been hurt in fights before. staggered by numerous opponents. So I don't know. I have a lot of reservations. I feel like, once again, like I did with Johnny Hendricks, I feel like it's the pick I should make. That Rory MacDonald winning makes a lot more sense to my analyst's mind. And because he's Rory MacDonald instead of Johnny Hendricks, I feel like I have the benefit of hindsight, but maybe I'm just convincing myself that Rory MacDonald has all these advantages that it turns out Johnny Hendricks didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's a strange dynamic. I understand exactly where you're coming from with that. I really think that those intangibles do matter here. That having access to those kinds of training partners and that kind of plan going in addition to, like, again, it's hard to overstate this. Like, MacDonald is as close to an all-terrain fighter, a do-everything fighter, as exists in this sport.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's nothing he doesn't know how to do. I mean, he's a guy who could strike successfully with Robbie Lawler for the better part of 5 rounds, but who can also be competitive in a pure grappling fight, or in a pure grappling match with guys like JT Torres, you know. And like, he survived. He's the only guy to survive effectively on the bottom against Damian Maia in Maia's run at 170.
To come back from Damian Maia being on top of him and beat him, he is the only guy who has done that.
Yeah, like, that is, think about that for a second. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, yeah. We saw Maia destroy Gunnar Nelson, an elite grappler who's competed at the ADCCs, who has been labeled a prodigy. Like, we saw, and somehow MacDonald was the one who survived and was able to make it through that round and then get the fight back to where he wanted it and beat the ever-loving shit out of Damian Maia for 10 minutes.
Yeah. Except for 1.5 scary minutes in that third round, where exhausted old man Maia climbed back on top of him, and it seemed like it was over.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is like, it's hard to overstate how good Rory MacDonald is at doing everything. So
yeah, I agree with you. I'm nervous about it, but I agree with you. I feel like that's the pick to make. How disappointing will it be, Pat, when Rory winning this fight sets all of our expectations for MacDonald Lawler 3, and then Tyron Woodley knocks out Robbie Lawler in round 1. Because I
don't even want to think about that, man.
Totally.
We've interviewed Tyron Woodley. We like Tyron Woodley, great guy. But I would be really disappointed if that's how this incredible run of Robbie Lawler as UFC welterweight champion ends.
I think because the world is an ironic and entropic place, that is what's going to happen. I have a feeling in my bones that is what's going to happen, and we're going to have to watch him. We're going to have Rory MacDonald get his second title shot against Tyron Woodley, a man whom he comfortably dismantled 2 years ago. So that'll be fun.
Clinically dismantled him.
All right. Well, I think that's enough on this fight. Obviously, there's a lot more to be said yet, but we'll be talking about it a lot in the coming days. And, of course, in the aftermath, I'm sure it will be interesting. Even if it's a slow-paced fight, I think it'll be one of those methodical, interesting chess matches that I will have such a fun time watching over and over again. I'm really looking forward to it. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, as I said at the top of the show, we're going to be talking about the welterweight clash between Donald Cerrone and Patrick Cote, and then the inaugural women's flyweight bout in the UFC between Valerie Letourneau and Joanne Calderwood. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. And we are back. Pat, let's go ahead and talk about Cowboy Cerrone versus Patrick Cote. First things first, I gotta say, makes me a little nervous to see former lightweight, even if he was a large lightweight, former lightweight Cowboy Cerrone, Donald Cerrone, fighting we have now agreed, former light heavyweight in Patrick Cote. I just don't know how I feel about him taking that kind of fight. Now, certainly Donald Cerrone is that guy. He will just fight pretty much anybody that you give him a shot against, and to his credit, I think he's way better at recovering from some of the crushing losses he's had than many, because he doesn't care that much about any one fight. But Patrick Cote is dangerous, and I think more dangerous than ever before, despite the fact that he's now, 36 years old. So I think this fight's... It's a lot more intriguing than I would have thought it would be 2 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Cote is really on a nice run. Now, I think it's important to note that Cote's recent run here has been against some of the older fighters in the division. He is 5-1 at welterweight, but those wins are over Ben Saunders, whom we all like. But Saunders at this point is like a grizzled veteran. Josh Berkman, who's been around forever, Joe Riggs, and Kyle Noak with a competitive loss to Stephen Thompson
and Bobby Volker, who is
also Bobby Volker,
professional opponent Bobby Volker.
Yeah, most famous for getting his block knocked off by by Robbie Lawler with just the sweetest head kick.
Yeah,
but yeah, so I think it's important not to overstate not to overstate this, while at the same time recognizing that Cote has made real improvements to his game. He remains really durable. He's dangerous. He's mean. He's well-rounded, and he knows how to use his size. That's the really important thing to me in this matchup. Cerrone is going to have maybe a slight height advantage, but Cote is probably going to walk into the octagon 15, 20, 25 pounds heavier than him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's also, let me see, the only guy in the last 5 fights not to be knocked out by Stephen Thompson. A list which includes Johnny Hendricks and Robert Whittaker. So that's not a bad honor to have on his sleeve.
Cote probably has the best chin in MMA. Right now, I genuinely think he has the best chin in MMA. Maybe the best chin in MMA history, all things considered. Considering he has now been fighting as a professional for almost 14 years, he has never actually been knocked out. He's been in there with punchers. He's been in there with Alan Belcher. He's been in there with Anderson Silva. He's been in there with Drew McFedries. He's been in there with he was in there with Chris Lieben. And he's been in there with Stephen Thompson at 170. He has never been knocked out. Never. In 32 professional fights.
He was crazy. Knocked out to the back of his brainstem by Alessio Sakara.
Oh yeah, well Sakara
he was illegally knocked out.
Yeah, so Sakara was hitting that old school Vitor Belfort action right there.
Yeah, definitely. But it's a good point, and that durability. I mean, that's a big thing. Donald Cerrone is not the most durable guy in the world. Like Rory MacDonald, he makes up for that by just being tough as nails. We've seen him hurt badly in many fights that he has gone on to win, or almost always improved steadily after recovering. That happened against Eddie Alvarez. It happened against... Well, who else did he get hurt early against?
It happened against Rafael Dos Anjos the first time they fought. He got knocked down with a straight left to the body,
Melvin
right hook
Gillard.
to head combination.
Melvin Gillard stunned him badly. He even improved pretty remarkably against Nate Diaz after getting just shit kicked in the first round. And if you watch that fight, Donald Cerrone actually composed himself pretty well. He's a slow starter, but he recovers well, and he's tough. Thing is getting hit by Patrick Cote. Cote is one of those guys like Jeremy Stevens, who I think has been advertised as a harder puncher than he is, but he's also become a much more technical striker in recent years, and I think can now put his power to use better than ever before. And then you have to consider the fact that this is a former career middleweight. This is a substantially thicker, more heavily built guy than Donald Cerrone, and more than Donald Cerrone is used to dealing with. And he didn't have an absolutely easy time when he fought Cowboy Oliveira, when he fought Alex Oliveira. Fortunately, he had a massive advantage in grappling skill and in wrestling. But I don't think that Cote is going to be flummoxed on the ground the same way. And part of me feels like this could be similar to Cote's fight with Ben Saunders, who's not that dissimilar from Donald Cerrone as a fighter.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cerrone is going to have a very pronounced speed advantage here. Cote is not fast. Cote wasn't fast at 185. No. Cote is definitely not fast at 170. Thompson is a fast dude, but it's notable how kind of plodding Cote looked in comparison.
Yeah.
And that was true. I mean, even against Ben Saunders, again, who's not the fastest dude, Cote was not the faster guy in that matchup. So but the problem here for Cerrone is you just can't let Cote get his hands on you at some point.
And the problem is that Cerrone's speed is going to come in the form of striking quickness, because he's not a light-footed, mobile fighter. He's not the kind of guy who moves around and jumps around the ring. He's not Stephen Thompson, so I wouldn't say he's foot slow necessarily, but his style is certainly more that he wants to kind of be on the fringe of range and quickly strike you or throw off your timing, and I can definitely see that kind of evening the speed advantage, because Cote, like we've already alluded to, is the kind of guy who can absolutely afford to take a shot coming in and nail you with something big. Now, again, I don't want to oversell him as a puncher, but you don't need to be a massive puncher to hurt Donald Cerrone. Eddie Alvarez stunned him, not a giant puncher. And Cote is a former middleweight, a former career middleweight who definitely does pack a considerable punch.
Yeah, this is he also throws just vicious low kicks. So he's not going to be afraid to operate at Donald Cerrone's preferred range here. And again, you alluded to this. Cote is still not the world's best defensive wrestler. He's still giving up takedowns regularly at welterweight, despite having a size advantage over pretty much everybody he's fought. But with that said, even if you take him down, he's not a novice. He's not going to panic, and give up his back and give up a mounted triangle the way that Alex Oliveira did. So I think Cerrone is still probably a better and certainly a more dynamic grappler than Cote is. But it's not like a night and day skill difference of the type that Cote had or that Cerrone had against Oliveira and has had in some of his other fights.
Didn't Cote just about armbar Ben Saunders before knocking him out?
He did just about armbar Ben Saunders.
Yeah.
So, I mean, none of this is to say that none of this is to say that Cerrone can't or won't win the fight. I'm actually still picking him here, but we're pointing out the ways in which fighting at welterweight is a much different beast, and there are ways in which this is a particularly difficult stylistic matchup for Cerrone.
Yeah, it's a difficult physical matchup, I think. Stylistically, I think Cerrone has beaten guys with Cote's kind of style before. Kind of slow guys who operate from a fairly long range and jump in with big shots. I think he can do that. But physically, it does give me some pause. Of course, Cote has been fighting for a long time, but Cerrone is not exactly a fresh spring chicken. He's been fighting since February 2006. So he has passed his 10-year anniversary. He's been more active than just about anybody else on the roster in that time. He put together 37 fights. He also has 29 kickboxing matches to his name and a boxing fight as well. So the guy has been around the block. I part of me just feels like that drop-off has to be coming soon. That Donald Cerrone, sometime very soon, is not going to look like himself. And is going to get hurt more easily, or is going to struggle to pull the trigger or something. But again, we're talking against 36-year-old Patrick Cote, who's been fighting since 2002, so I can't exactly give him the advantage in that department. It's another fight, two welterweight matchups with a lot of caveats that are both more difficult to pick than they seem like they should be at first. Donald Cerrone is the guy with the momentum. Patrick Cote is old and not as well-rounded. It feels like Donald Cerrone should win. I guess I'll chicken out and pick him. But I really, really think that Patrick Cote can be really dangerous for him here. And I'm pretty sure Patrick Cote is a sizable underdog as well, which doesn't really...
Not that substantial. I think Cerrone is a minus 165 favorite. So
that about makes sense then.
Yeah, the odds makers, I think, see exactly the same dynamics in this fight that we do. It's just, if Cerrone can keep this at range, he should comfortably outpoint Cote because he works at a much faster pace. He throws a lot more volume. Yeah. He moves better than Cote does. But if he lets Cote get his hands on him, especially if they get into the clinch, we've seen Cote manhandle much bigger and much stronger and much more technically skilled clinch fighters than Donald Cerrone before.
Yeah.
So at 185, Cote was a strong clinch fighter.
Yeah.
So and we saw Alex Oliveira gave Cerrone absolute fits there before Cerrone was able to hit a takedown and get it to the mat. And I don't think that that's going to be as much of an option for him against Cote.
Yeah, and it's not easy to fight Cote when he's hurt either. He can collect himself and regain his composure, but he is also more than willing to brawl with you if you come after him when he's hurt. If you really try to press your advantage, he still has that kind of brawler's instinct in him. And that makes him really dangerous. That was what gave Josh Berkman a lot of trouble, despite seeming to really comfortably win that first round. He hurt Cote and tried to come after him, and Cote started to take over from there. Cote got him in the clinch and recovered and started to beat him up. So I'm gonna pick Cerrone like you did, but I think it's a really interesting fight. And one of these days, I think Donald Cerrone is going to take that early shot. I mean, he already did against Rafael dos Anjos, so who knows? But one of these days, he's going to take that shot from the guy that's not supposed to knock him out, and it's going to knock him out. So this could definitely be that fight. Next up, before we move on to our final docket, our very full docket, our fight smorgasbord for the third segment, let's talk really quickly about the women's flyweight matchup between Valerie Letourneau, Joanne Calderwood. Very happy to see Valerie Letourneau at flyweight. She made strawweight. She did very well there. She was very competitive with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but boy, did she look like a skeleton. She looked like she was really killing herself, and I think especially for females to be, with the higher body fat percentage, to be cutting that much water is really, really dangerous for your long-term health, for your kidneys. So I'm happy to see her go up a division, even though she looks comfortable at bantamweight. I know she wants a size advantage, so this is a better way for her to get it. Of course, it comes against another former strawweight who was very tall for the division in Joanne Calderwood, so I don't know how much of an edge Letourneau will actually have in terms of size in this matchup, but I do feel that Letourneau has the edge as a range striker. Do you agree?
Yes and no. I think that there are spaces where Letourneau is going to have an advantage here, and I think that there are spaces where Calderwood's going to have an edge. I think at kicking distance, I favor Calderwood pretty substantially. I think at anything beyond round kicking range, I think it's Letourneau's fight to lose. But then once you get inside, I think there's little question in my mind that Calderwood is the better clinch fighter. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm picking Calderwood in this fight. I know that Letourneau is a favorite here. I think she's like minus 180 or minus 190 or something like that. But I think it's going to be really hard for Letourneau to walk the tightrope of range that she needs to comfortably win this fight. I also think that Calderwood, once she gets past the first minute and a half or 2 minutes of the fight, just works at a much faster pace. I think this is going to be a really fun back and forth fight, a lot of action. But I think that Letourneau is going to have trouble keeping it in that range without getting chewed up on the outside.
I do think Letourneau is going to have an easier time keeping a pace, not draining herself to 115. I think it's always really, really easy to look at a fighter who cuts a lot of weight and say, oh, they can't, they either they don't hit hard or that they don't throw very much. I think Dustin Poirier is a great example of this, of somebody who moves up in weight and suddenly is kind of freed from the shackles of their own stamina, that they haven't drained so much water, they feel alive when they come into the cage. I think I can only imagine Letourneau is going to look a little more comfortable. If I recall, she looked a little more comfortable throwing more frequently when she was a bantamweight, and I think she is technically better. We've talked a lot about how well prepared her team at ATT has her for all of her fights. She always comes in with a very intelligent game plan, a very intelligent approach to her opponents. That being said, Calderwood's a TriStar now, isn't she?
Yeah, she's been there for her last couple of fights.
Yeah. Oh, has she? See, I don't know about Joanne Calderwood. She has a Donald Cerrone thing going on. You know what I mean? She's a very slow starter, and it's really hard for me to expunge the image of her body language in that Marina Moroz fight.
She looked like an entirely different fighter to me when she fought last July. Like, she had a lot of personal shit going on. Like, this, not trying to write off the loss to Moroz, because that was not good. But now we know Moroz is actually pretty good.
Yeah. And
like that was a huge upset at the time, but maybe it shouldn't have been, given what we know now.
Sure.
So to your point about Letourneau and volume, yeah, she threw in her lone UFC bantamweight fight. She landed over 100 strikes in 15 minutes. So she can work a good pace. It's just that was against a really bad striker in Elizabeth Phillips, like somebody who had
I remember
genuinely had no idea what she was doing.
I remember that fight.
Yeah. So like, And the other piece for this, the other piece of this for me is Calderwood being at TriStar. Calderwood also has a lot more room to get better from fight to fight. Like Calderwood has been a known commodity for a while now, but when she was on The Ultimate Fighter, she'd been fighting as a professional for less than 2 years.
Yeah,
she's still only been fighting as a pro for 3.5 years. Like she has a lot of room to get better from fight to fight. In a way that Letourneau doesn't necessarily. That doesn't mean that I think I understand why Letourneau's the favorite, and I think she should be. I'm just betting on some substantial improvements from Calderwood, especially with her. Like she's 5'6", she was cutting a shitload of weight to get down to 115 too. Like what applies to Letourneau, I think also applies to Calderwood to some extent.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think I do have to lean Letourneau's way based on what I have seen in the past. Calderwood definitely looked better against Courtney Casey than she did in the Marina Moroz fight, but in all three of those fights, the Sohee Ham fight, the Courtney Casey fight, and the Marina Moroz fight, she has been a slow starter and has had difficulty adapting early. And Valerie Letourneau has shown, even at strawweight, to be a very good fast starter. I think that she's a very good first-round winner. She has a knack for surprising her opponents, either with a knockdown or with aggression or with her wrestling game. She's done a very good job of that. And I think that the ATT guys can only expect to come out here and give Calderwood a bit of a scare early and then try to hold on to that lead rather than giving her the space she needs. I think this matchup kind of reflects, in a lot of ways, the dynamics of the MacDonald versus Thompson fight, except that Joanne Calderwood, being the more diverse range kicker like Stephen Thompson, is nowhere near as good at maintaining the distance as Stephen Thompson is, while Letourneau can compete at kicking range like MacDonald can against Thompson and is the significantly better boxer, I think, in mid-boxing range. And then, of course, Calderwood's a better clinch fighter in terms of doing damage than a guy like Thompson, but then again, Letourneau is probably a better wrestler, and I think Letourneau's more than good enough to hang with Calderwood on the ground. She has some dangerous submissions, but we saw in that Moroz fight again, she's still very inexperienced. That means big improvements are always just around the corner, but it also means that you're still waiting for improvements. You know, when we're waiting for improvements, that means that there are things that need fixing now. And I just can't quite bank on the fact with Calderwood that all the things are going to be shored up. Letourneau, yes, she's pretty much a finished product. I don't think she's going to make any major strides, though I do hope we see her return to her volume striking ways at flyweight. But I think as a finished product, and as somebody with a lot of high-level experience who just went in there and hung with the dominant strawweight champion for 5 rounds, I have to give her the edge as a round winner over Calderwood with some caveats, of course. I think it's a really interesting fight, and I hope that it opens up a flyweight division. I know that will substantially weaken strawweight and probably weaken even more women's bantamweight, but I like seeing the ladies have more options to fight at the weights that actually suit them. So.
Yeah, so I don't think that they're inaugurating a new division. I think that this was just a fight where it was easier for both of them to do 125.
Yeah, I know there's no intention, but I hope that seeing this and seeing hopefully 2 improved strawweights gives them the opportunity to make more non-standard fights.
Yeah, bantamweight, like we've talked about this before, but like women's bantamweight is just not a deep enough division to sustain itself. Like there's just not enough talent there. So, okay, at any rate, should we take another break and then come back with our smorgasbord?
Let's take a break. We will come back, knives and forks at the ready, and prepare to feast on a fight smorgasbord. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. And we are back. Fight smorgasbord time. By the way, we need a sound effect for this segment. A lot of segments we have now that don't have sound effects. We have our wonderful heavy bag sound effect that I never forget to play, and that I'm always happy to warn our listeners about before it happens. But we've got Fight Smorgasbord. I think some disgusting chewing noises or something would be great for that. Please don't actually do that.
Maybe a belch, like a really good firm belch.
I think our listeners would love that. And then also punch counterpunch, which we could have done for Letourneau Calderwood. I didn't realize we were going opposite ways on that one.
Yeah. No, I know.
So people out there, if you are savvy and you are a fan of the show, make us a sound effect. First up, Fight Smorgasbord. Let's go ahead and talk about my favorite division, the middleweights. We've got Tamden McCrory versus Krzysztof Jotko. Of course, McCrory came back and beat our buddy Josh Salmon. Looked really solid in doing so. He's looked really solid since his re-debut, now 29 years old. Still, it was 6 years ago that he was first a UFC fighter. I think his last fight was before his return was 6 years ago. Now he's fighting Krzysztof Jotko, who, despite having a name that does not seem like a fighter anyone in the U.S. would care about, is on one of the better runs in the middleweight division right now. He's got 3 fights under his belt. He's beat Tor Trying, which is so-so, but Scott Askham and Brad Scott, and a competitive fight with Magnus Siedenblad before that. So I think Jotko is actually a fighter with some potential in this division. He's still only 26 years old. He's only been fighting since 2010. I think he is, based on his last his last fight against Bradley Scott, seems to really be putting things together now. While Tamden McCrory, dangerous, but not necessarily a consistent type of fighter.
Yeah, I feel like we both have reservations about Tamden McCrory that we can't quite put our finger on. Like, does that make sense at all? Like, I can't figure out why it is that I'm not sold on a guy who has that kind of dynamic finishing ability, both on the feet and on the mat. Like, I think it's because I'm not sold on him as a wrestler. Like Josh Saman, our mutual friend, was able to take him down a few times, and Josh is like a solid wrestler, a solid clinch fighter, but nowhere close to being elite in that regard.
Yeah, and without even discussing Josh's wrestling ability, McCrory didn't come close to defending the takedowns.
No, that was his Achilles heel early in his UFC career. Was his inability to stuff takedowns. It's what got him beat by the 2009 version of John Howard. You know, I think that's still a concern for me. I'm not sure how sustainable his game is over the course of like a 3-round fight that takes place mostly on the feet, which is what Jotko I think is going to want to give him here. Jotko is kind of a weird, unorthodox striker. He's a big, rangy southpaw, throws a lot of jabs, sharp straight left, but really likes like reverse elbows, long kicks. Like, it's a game, I really like it a lot. It's tricky, it's fun. He's athletic, he's quick, he moves well through the space of the cage. Like, I like Jotko.
Yeah. I think he's a lot of fun to watch. He's an intriguing fighter. He has a game that doesn't necessarily... This is kind of weird. It feels like Tamden McCrory is the guy whose game should be consistent but doesn't feel like it. Jotko's the guy whose skill set doesn't feel like it should fit together, but it actually does pretty well. And again, I think more so than ever in that fight with Brad Scott, probably because Jotko was more cognizant than ever before of the space of the cage, controlling his distance from the fence, keeping his back off of it, feinting and moving forward, and not just waiting on his opponent to lead, which he has done in the past. He did that a bit in his fight with Scott Askham, which ended up being a split decision, although I did think he pretty convincingly won it. Not much of a finisher, which is an issue against a guy like McCrory, who does go for the finish, but I can definitely see Jotko landing some big body kicks, landing those straight lefts, and just moving around enough to frustrate McCrory. I think the thing with McCrory is that he has one very dangerous range, which is in the pocket. He doesn't fight long all that well, but he fights really well tall. If you come in close, he will snap your head off your shoulders with uppercuts. He will put brilliant combinations together, and he has great timing, great proprioception when it comes to connecting his punches to your head, even as you're flailing all over the place and moving around. That's if you stay in the pocket, or if you even come into the pocket much in the first place. When he has, in the past, been denied that range, McCrory has started to look a little desperate. And we didn't get to see that happen against Josh because the fight kept going to the ground. But Jotko is a very stout defensive wrestler, a very good offensive wrestler in his own right, better, I think, than Josh. I hope he won't mind me saying. Has a little more of a tricky takedown game that he relies on more regularly than Josh does. And yeah, I don't see McCrory pulling Yatko to the ground, and I don't see him spending much time in that range he really likes. And since Yatko is shown to be more comfortable putting his strikes together and using his footwork in between them and feinting as well, I think he's kind of going to win a slow, methodical fight, while McCrory looks for the dynamic finish that is not really being presented to him the way he wants it to be.
Yeah, that's exactly my read on this fight. It's interesting. It's a good fight. It's this middleweight division, Connor. You've said it for a long time.
It's the best. The thing with middleweight, man, is that there are pretty much no fights that are not interesting. Middleweight is the division for hardcore fight fans, because either it is some kind of hilariously bad, and you get to laugh at it and have fun in a sort of an ironic sense, or there's a lot of grit and toughness on display, because those kinds of traits go really far in this division, which doesn't have a ton of elite athletes, or there's a lot of interesting craft, because this is a division of journeymen. This is the League of Extraordinary Journeymen, and there's a lot of guys who are surprisingly crafty technicians. And so we get a little bit of all that in this fight. Could be ugly, could be pretty. I think it'll definitely be interesting, so I'm looking forward to it. Then we have a bantamweight matchup next up, actually happening just before that one, and we're just going to be running down the list in reverse order here. That's between Chris Beal and Joe Soto. Soto came into the UFC with a lot of shine when he performed admirably in a short notice fight with TJ Dillashaw, despite being knocked out in the 5th round. Since then, he has not had a very easy time of it. I think most people thought he won his fight with Mishinori Tanaka, which happened in January of this year, but it was definitely close, and Soto has struggled to assert himself, and Chris Beal's kind of been in the same boat since that flying knee knockout he got back in April of 2014 over the now defunct Patrick Williams.
Yeah, Beal feels like the kind of fighter that I should like a lot, because he's athletic and because he's got some pop in his hands, and I don't see it with him. Like, I don't think it's ever going to happen. He's been in the game for quite a while. He's had a lot of opportunities to make real improvements, and he doesn't feel like he's gotten better as a fighter. He
makes bafflingly bad decisions. I think that is really his Achilles heel. Because in a lot of ways, Pat, I think this fight for Joe Soto, this is kind of similar to the Mishinori Tanaka fight. In Beal, we have a guy who is a good boxer and a good wrestler, who can take advantage of the fact that Soto is not a great defensive wrestler, and also mix it up, throwing hands at him, and very explosive and fairly powerful, can leap in from long range. Mishinori Tanaka is he's the Japanese alpha male fighter, isn't he? In fact, I think he has trained at alpha male. He has that Uriah Faber style. And Beal has that, but with more volume and probably a little more power, which would make it seem like he should be favored. But Beal just doesn't know how to put things together. When he fought Chris Kalades, he seemed to really have the edge early in that fight. And he just couldn't get it going. I don't even know really what it was. There was a lot of him moving his head and just getting clipped because he wasn't firing off of his defense, just kind of dropping his hands and letting Kalades work volume against him. Similar thing happened in the fight with Neil Seery. Now, again, those are two solid fighters. He went to decisions with both of them. The Kalades fight was fairly close, but I don't know. There's something about Chris Beal where he just doesn't have a consistent mentality. It doesn't have a reliable mindset for fighting, and I think Joe Soto definitely does. He's not as dynamic, he's not as good a finisher as Beal, but he knows how to just throw volume and put shots together and win rounds, although, again, lacking that dynamicism, sometimes he struggles to put his stamp on them.
Yeah, so, the big thing that stands out to me here is the quality of competition, that both guys have fought in the UFC. So Soto has lost to TJ Dillashaw, Anthony Birchak, and then in his last fight, Michinori Tanaka, who I think Tanaka is one of the better prospects at bantamweight,
sure,
who isn't getting talked about very much.
Tanaka's a very solid fighter.
Yeah, we're talking about in Beal a guy who lost to Chris Kalades, who's just not that good, and Neil Seery, I think actually is pretty good. I enjoy Neil Seery a very great deal, but I don't think that Seery is on the level of any of those guys that Soto has lost to.
No, probably not. Again, this could be another fight where Soto comes in and he should be favored and he should win, and he gets stunned at one point, because that's a problem. Soto has been fragile. And he's a little too complacent sometimes, just putting his hands up and waiting for you to stop throwing. But again, I don't think Beal's the kind of guy to recognize that advantage and really press it. I just don't think that's his strong suit. So I can definitely see either guy winning this fight. I think it should definitely be a fun, entertaining, back and forth, scrappy kind of matchup. But I do like Joe Soto to get the decision.
Yeah, same. So next up we have the man Elias Theodorou versus Sam Alvey. This is another very middleweight fight.
Yes. Sam Alvey's the middleweight's middleweight, right? His level of athleticism would never cut it in the lighter divisions. Can you imagine a guy who looked like Sam Alvey with his physique and moved the way Sam Alvey moves, cutting it at welterweight?
No, absolutely not.
No, of course not. And he's not like physically dominant enough to make it in a division like light heavyweight or heavyweight, or necessarily durable enough. Though I think he is pretty tough. But at middleweight, he's perfect. He has just enough craft to catch guys coming in who are not that technically savvy. He's a devastating counterpuncher, especially with that right hook, which is really kind of an awkwardly thrown punch. He doesn't even throw it with the kind of... It's almost like he often throws it like a sort of pushing jab, but it has a lot of snap to it. For whatever reason, maybe he punches like Gennady Golovkin. You know what I mean? Golovkin has this... I know that sounds like a crazy comparison.
That does sound crazy.
Golovkin has this...
really crazy.
Think of some specific examples. So specifically, I'm thinking of the knockout Golovkin got over... who was it he knocked out with a left hook like last year?
Oh, was it the one where he looked like he was driving a coffin nail in?
Yes, that was over Marco Antonio Rubio. Golovkin often looks like he's pushing his punches or punching with his arms. Often. He doesn't have to set his feet the way other fighters do. And I don't know if he's got like short, snappy tendons or something, or just a really heavy set skeleton. I don't know what the scientific explanation for it is, but a guy like Golovkin can punch, even though he does have good mechanics, can punch with improper mechanics, or throw a quick punch that he doesn't have time to commit his weight to and still really hurt you. And Sam Alvey has that same thing going on. That's what I mean. I don't mean to say that Sam Alvey boxes like Gennady Golovkin. I know people think I don't like Gennady Golovkin, but I wouldn't take it that far.
Yeah, so I'm very much with that. He's got a really weird, really awkward game. It makes this a really interesting matchup for Theodorou, who was not that long ago a very blue chip prospect, and is still one of the better up and comers in this division. Like, this is a fight that Theodorou should win because he throws a lot more volume. He's a lot more diverse. Alvey is a pretty solid defensive wrestler, but he's not. Nobody's going to confuse him with Jose Aldo in that department. Yeah. He's a decent clinch fighter. But so he can challenge Theodorou in ways that make this interesting. If Theodorou fucks up, then he's going to get his block knocked off.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this an intriguing fight. Like, it's basically, does Theodorou take a decision or finish Alvey late after wearing him down with his work rate, or does Alvey just take his head clean off with one good punch?
Yeah.
That's the dynamic. It makes it really interesting.
Yeah, pretty much. And I do have to favor Theodorou just because the volume. And I think especially the fact that he likes to throw a lot of kicks, and we have seen Alvey struggle with that. Alvey has a very unathletic looking stance. He stands very tall, knees barely bent, and kind of plods around very flat-footed. Now, some of that probably accounts for the pop that he has when he counterpunches. He's always got his feet set to drive right through your head with that right hook and the left hand that comes after it. But he's ripe to be kicked. He keeps a lot of weight in his front leg and is just very static. And Theodorou maybe moved around too much for his own good in his last fight. But I think also there was the fact that Thiago Santos punished him badly to the body and wore him down in a way that Sam Alvey has not been known to do. And so I think Theodorou will likely land a lot of volume. Again, he's not that clean technically that he can do that without exposing himself. But it's always a tough thing for me to just say, well, this guy's going to win it all until he gets caught with a punch and gets knocked out. It's hard to bank on the one-shot knockout, even with a fighter as powerful as Alvey. So I think I'll go with Theodorou by decision, but it's a middleweight fight. It's a weird one.
Yeah, I mean, I like Theodorou here for exactly that same reason, and I like Theodorou in general. He's a fun dude, but it would not at all be surprising if Alvey landed that punch. Still, Theodorou takes a decision.
Alvey's a fun dude too, by the way. Very likable guy, Sam Alvey.
Yeah, you can't not like Smilin' Sam. If you don't like Smilin' Sam, that's probably something wrong with you and not him.
You've probably been knocked out by him.
Yeah. Finally, I think last fight we have time to talk about here: Randa Markos versus Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger at strawweight. What are your thoughts here, Connor?
Oh, well, there's a lot to be said about Randa Markos, right? She was on The Ultimate Fighter. She seemed to have a ton of potential. She's very, very athletic. She's got power. She's one of those natural scrambling types. She's a very good transitional fighter. I don't know that she has the depth. Some of it, of course, is the fact that Markos is in a really unenviable position because she performed really well. She has probably a bit of name value because of her time on The Ultimate Fighter, and she has beaten some good fighters, Aisling Daly, and she competed with very good fighters on Tough. And so you've got to give her some credit and put her in some good matchups. Unfortunately, there's a very thin line in women's strawweight between the journey women and the elite fighters. Most of the fighters that are in strawweight in the UFC are elite strawweights. Even women like Aisling Daly are really solid, experienced fighters. And so she's had to fight people like Jessica Penne and Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and she's comported herself pretty well, but in matchups against fighters with that level of experience or that level of craft, she has really struggled to maintain competitiveness with them, right? Those are the kind of fights where she'll have a lot of good moments early, but then she kind of runs out of ideas as the fight goes on, or the opponent figures out the first set of things she shows them, and as the fight goes on, it turns out Ronda only has that first set. That's all she can show them.
Yeah, so this is true of a lot of raw fighters with a lot of athletic gifts to them, right? That like they come out early and they have a lot of success because it's really surprising how fast they are and how hard they hit.
Yeah.
Like this was true of Tyron Woodley earlier in his career. You remember like this has been true of a lot of really highly athletic fighters, especially in a division like strawweight that doesn't have a ton of depth to it. So these kinds of fighters can have a lot of success, like Markos did when she beat Tisha Torres on The Ultimate Fighter, kind of out of nowhere. Like it's like it can just be shocking when you get in there with these fighters and they kind of surprise you with their physical gifts. But against durable, high level competition who can withstand that initial burst, like suddenly the game changes, because no matter how fast you are, no matter how hard you hit, like your opponent, if they're durable enough, can figure you out. They can timing beats that. Timing is going to beat that raw speed. If you don't have a lot of layers, if you don't have a lot of setups, if you don't have a lot of different things that you know how to do, experienced, well-rounded, well-coached fighters are always going to get past that.
Yeah,
which is exactly what has happened to Markos in her losses in the UFC.
Yeah,
and on Tough too.
Well-coached is prescient for a number of reasons. First of all, the win over Tisha Torres on Tough. I don't know about you personally. I would pick Tisha Torres pretty comfortably over both Randa Markos and Carla Esparza in actual professional fights.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was a favorite to win Tough for a reason, and she lost for a reason, I think, because Tough is not necessarily a great place for a fighter who relies on kind of being the smarter, better prepared fighter. You take them away from their camp and their trainers, and you give them all of these short-notice fights. People who are like Tisha Torres can become very different, and we've seen how dramatically better she is as a pro when she gets a full camp to prepare for her opponents. And so I would definitely give her the edge in those matchups were they to rematch. Meanwhile, Randa Markos, who seemed to be making some really good strides moving to the gym we've talked a lot about today, TriStar, judging by social media, has not been at TriStar for this camp. She's now training at Michigan Top Team in Detroit with Darren Cruikshank, who's a good fighter, but definitely not the caliber of preparation I would hope for, not the kind of caliber of preparation she would get at a gym like TriStar.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about Randa Marcos. Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger is not terribly athletic, but she's big for the division. She's really long, and she fights long. She also pushes a great pace. She throws a lot of combinations. She's very durable. She's tough. And I think what both you and I are banking on here, despite the fact that Jones-Lybarger is a slight underdog, is her weathering the early storm and then just piling volume on later in the fight once Marcos kind of runs out of ideas.
Yeah, I think she's not athletic in the sense we usually talk about, but she's definitely strong. And she definitely has some snap in her shots, though she's not a knockout artist and, in fact, has no knockout wins, nor does Randa Marcos. And I think in this matchup, Lybarger carries her power more into the later rounds of the fight. She struggled really, really mightily with Tisha Torres. She could not adapt to Torres's lateral movement. She couldn't adapt to Torres's counter wrestling and counter punching and the weird way that she mixes those things together. But that was a fight that Lybarger took on, a week's notice? Something like that?
A week and a half, something like that.
With very little time to prepare. She is still very inexperienced like Marcos, so we can expect improvements from both of these women. And I just think Lybarger throws so much more volume than fighters that Marcos has already fought. She's like Kowalkiewicz, but with a little more snap. Like, she makes you feel her shots, even if she's not going to knock you out with a single punch. She's not an arm puncher like Kowalkiewicz is. And I don't think that Marcos has the consistency of approach to move laterally the way Torres did. Torres actually has some of the best footwork in this division. It's kind of weird sometimes, but she's always very consistent with the way that she moves. And Marcos, she's just not consistent in really anything she does. So
yeah.
It's a tough one to call. I think it'll probably be another one of those split decision kind of fights, a really close back and forth matchup. But I do like Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger because she's tough and she throws volume, and she's already beaten some very solid fighters, just like Randa Marcos. And I think she has, again, if we're talking a coach matchup, I was looking forward to seeing Firas Zahabi versus John Crouch, two coaches that I really respect, whose work I really respect. And then I looked into it, and I was like, oh, it's John Crouch versus Darren Cruikshank. I think I have to favor John Crouch and Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger in that matchup.
Yep, very much so.
All right, well, that just about does it for us. Thank you guys for joining us for today's episode of Heavy Hands. A lot of interesting fights coming up on this card, and we hope you enjoyed our discussion of them. If you want to get in touch with us with questions or other queries, which is a synonym for questions, whatever, you can do that on social media. The easiest way is on Twitter. You can find both of us there. I am at BoxingBusch, BUSCH. Pat is at Patrick_Wyman. Pat, before we head out, do you want to tell the people what you're working on this week?
Yeah, so I got a number of things going. I appeared on Luke Thomas's Monday Morning Analyst show yesterday to talk about
you replaced me.
Favorite 3.
You replaced me. I was supposed to do it and didn't respond quickly
enough. Really?
So I'll be on next week.
Oh, good stuff, man.
Yeah.
So was on that. Check that out. That was always a lot of fun talking to Luke. Then let's see. What else? Oh, I got my usual preview of this weekend's card coming, and then I'm writing a piece for the Washington Post on the art of fighting outside with Stephen Thompson and Rory MacDonald. So that'll have some nice gifts for you.
Very cool. Well, I will have sort of an in-depth piece on Dominic Cruz coming out this week to talk about his rise and his return to the title after a long period away, and that first defense now of his second reign against Uriah Faber. That'll be coming out probably tomorrow. I guess that means actually probably today if you're listening to this on Wednesday. I shouldn't timestamp these things, Pat. That's always a no-no in the podcasting world. And then otherwise, still working on a video for Muhammad Ali, looking to do like a pretty in-depth 15 to 20 minute breakdown of the skills that made him great to celebrate his life and his recent passing. So we're going to hopefully get that out this week as well. Lots of other things going on, but that's all I'm looking at this week. UFC 200 coming up, so videos and articles and, of course, more great analysis on Heavy Hands. Thank you again for listening. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.